It's thinking. There we are. We are live. Jose, how are you doing today, my friend?
I'm doing great. Brian, that someone says that the only thing that we have left in 2020 is Friday the 13th.
And here we are. I mean, we're pushing our luck. Should we even be broadcasting today? What are we thinking? Friday the 13th. Oh my goodness.
Well, at
Well,
least we're going to have fun on Friday the 13th.
yeah, I saw a meme on LinkedIn yesterday. It's like, what else can go wrong? Oh, Thanksgiving is coming, and then it showed like a Godzilla scene, and they had a giant turkey destroying the city. So that's the next thing to come. So, Jose, we're live streaming. This is our third episode. I think things are going great. So knock on something here. We're
I
live
vote here.
on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter. We're on all of them, and we have a stream going here. So please, in the stream, say hello. We'd love to see the people we're talking with. And at the end of our talk here today, we're going to also be taking questions on food safety and today's topic, which is, what are we talking about today, Jose?
Um, we're going to try not to fight, but we're going to be talking about GNPs.
Good manufacturing practices, right? Good old
Yes.
GMPs. So
Yep.
the way I look at GMPs is it's kind of the basics, right? Of before we dive into it, right? I'm so anxious to get started with this. We have to have our morning drink, right?
Our coffee. Yeah.
Yep.
So we clear our throat.
Yes, everybody, join us for a sip of coffee and tea, please. Good morning, Edward. Nice to have you on the line. So good.
So
My
let me
wife
see.
switched me to, so much coffee now is roasted and super dark and burnt to crap. My wife has me drinking more of a mild roast now, and I'm liking it. It's good.
I was able to open up in my second screen, Brian, like I mentioned, the live chat, so I can see what you guys are, saying or posting or something like that.
Excellent. So Scott's
So
joined Colorado.
look at this.
So hey, Scott, I'm in Colorado too. I'm in Loveland, so up by Fort Collins, Ohio. Jacqueline's in Ohio. So of course, Jose is in lovely, sunny Florida. Now you're kind of by Miami, right? Is that right?
I'm about 30 minutes, half an hour from Miami's airport.
Nice. Good distance for a consultant like us. We have to be close to the airports. Maria's joining
Yeah.
us from Indianapolis. Welcome. Glad to have you guys here. So before I was trying to dive in too fast, had to have our coffee. Back on track, doing good. Good manufacturing practices, right? So as I was saying, when I remembered is blocking and tackling. GMPs are the basis for food safety, right? And
Yeah.
I kind of wanted to get up to the history of GMPs, right? It's kind of one of the first things in the U.S. that was done around food safety was GMPs.
Yeah. I mean, and this is something that anyone that is hearing this can search for.
Mm-hmm.
Look for the name Harvey Wiley online and look at what that guy did and how the FDA was created. And it was originally part of the USDA. It was the Bureau of Chemistry. And this guy was the director of this Bureau of Chemistry.
Right, and they
So
were,
it's quite interesting to see what they did.
yeah, I mean, they were what, the Poison Squad, right?
The Poison Squad.
1903. I mean, think about it, 117 years ago.
Yeah. And this Poison Squad, Brian, you may remember, was a group of people, a group of guys, basically, because I don't recall seeing there a lady now that we're saying this. So these guys got paid to eat food that was adulterated with different things, with poison. And that was the reason why they were called the Poison Squad. So they were performing tests on them before and after the food, and that's how they discover how these food, affects people.
So they were the guinea pigs. So they would say, "Hey, here's some food with
Yeah.
this chemical in it. Eat this and see if you feel sick."
Yes, more or less, Brian. And so the reason why Harvey Wiley did that is because the manufacturing conditions in the big deal there was the meat facilities, but it was everywhere. It's, he did a study on honey and he did other studies on other type of food, but it was a generalized issue.
Mhm.
Actually, the sulfanilamide case, which is what actually triggered the creation of the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act in 1938, was that, I mean, we have right now as medication addition of sulfa in as a medication.
Mhm.
And the thing is that they, in order to dilute that product, because it was given as a dry, I don't know, pill, I'm going to say, in order to dilute that, you know what they did? They use the same liquid that we add right now to the radiators of our car. That's how they dilute
Right.
that,
Ethylene glycol. That's
drug.
what we use. Yeah.
So it was terrible, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Kids died, right?
Yes, yes, a lot of kids died. Also adults, but I mean, it was bad. So that's a reason for regulation that we have right now, Brian.
Mhm.
Now, look at this. If you go right now to 21 CFR, 21 United States Code, this is law,
Yeah.
9, which is the Federal Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, in section 300 and, let me tell you, 341
Mhm.
is the first section for food. It says that we need to define what is our product. This was part of our conversation last week. So once we have a specifications for the finished product, section 342 says, well, if you're not in compliance with the specification of the product you are making, then let me define what is adulteration in 342, and
Mhm.
then section 343 defines what is misbranding.
Mhm.
And one of the definitions of adulteration, which is the one that is our topic for this week, is if anyone is identified work under insanitary conditions, the products are by default adulterated.
Right.
No matter if they are adulterated with filth or if they are adulterated with anything that is going to be a hazard, may cause illness or injury.
Right.
The key here, what we need to understand here for as a basis, as a start point for the GMPs, is that these sanitary conditions that we need to attain, they are the GMPs. As long as we are in full compliance with the GMPs applicable to your products and your processes, no matter if you do dietary supplements, if you do food, if you do, hey, by the way, drugs and animal feed and so on, they all have their own specific, eventually, GMPs, but those are the minimum conditions for anyone to maintain sanitary conditions at the facility.
Right. Well, what's interesting too, this is what's kind of cool about this is looking this from a historical perspective, is the terms that are written in the law. Right. These are very 20th century, 1890s, 1900s terms. Right. We don't in our day-to-day life talk about filth and insanitary conditions. Right. But these things are written in the law and they've been pulled through over 100 years. Right. Because filth. Right. And people don't know this, and they're probably going to go, "Oh," when they hear this from me, but there are limits that were created during these times around filth within different products. So they would take, right? So all of a sudden they had microscopes. So they would start looking at grains and different things under microscopes and say, ooh, what's this stuff? Oh, that's a bug leg. Okay. What's this? Oh, that's a hair. Okay. Well, what's this? Right. And they realized that these things that they couldn't see were there. And so they started putting limits around how much filth was allowed in different things, which as people who eat food, we're kind of like, wow, that's kind of gross.
Yep. So actually, look at this. And this is a joke that I sometimes make during any of the classes. So if you have a you have a specification for a cookie, let's say, and the
Uh-huh.
specification do not have hair, of course, because
Yeah.
hair is not defined as food. When you go to the definition of food, hair is not food. So
Okay.
you cannot make with food with something that is with an ingredient that is not food. That's here. So if you have hair in your product and the specification do not have hair as one of the ingredients, your product is adulterated by default.
Yeah.
Okay, simple as that.
Right.
Now, if you try to play, wiser than the law, and you say, you know what, I'm going to add on purpose hair to the list of ingredients because I don't want to pay for hairnet. Say that I'm crazy like that. Well, at that point, your product is misbranded because you are using an ingredient that is not approved to be used in the production of food.
Right. So they get you both ways. They gotcha. Well, and really, I mean, so from a mechanical standpoint of how the law works, when FDA goes through a process, right, when they're inspecting your facility and look at these type of things, and when you see write-ups, that's the terminology that the FDA references back to. Your product is,
Yes.
contains filth, manufactured under insanitary conditions. Therefore, your product is, to your point, Jose, adulterated and or misbranded under section yada yada yada, right?
And you know what, Brian? We are more, I'm going to say, used to the term contamination or cross contamination, and after ISMA, and especially in the preventive controls rules, we now have the cross contact for humans.
Yeah.
But you know what? At the end, we need to, and that's my opinion, but we need to be extremely aware how the regulator is going to call any event of cross contamination and cross contact, because at the end in the law is adulteration, and that's how we should be calling them.
Right, right. And so Jose and I were talking about this a little bit before we got online here and went live, is when you work in quality assurance, especially at the corporate level and you're running quality for companies, I did that for quite a long time, is understanding the legal side of this is a huge part of our job. And so if you're in quality assurance, you need to work very closely with your legal team, and your legal team needs to understand law, because food law, right? They may understand corporate law and how to do mergers and these type of things, but they need to understand food law. And if you don't have in-house counsel who understands food law, you need a food lawyer.
Yep. You need to know someone that understands what is written in the laws and the regulation. And again, this, Brian, very simple. No matter if it's program that you are developing for compliance with the FDA, your system, okay, because the FDA also requires people to develop systems. Well, when you are developing systems, you need to look for which are the requirements that I need to be in compliance with in order to develop my system. Well, from the FDA standpoint, those requirements are, simply put, the law and the regulations.
Right.
So if we do not read and understand what is written there, how can we comply with, with all of those requirements?
Right. Well, I think it's an important framework to make sure everybody understands that point, because it's an important one you just made. There's the law, then there's the regulations, and those are separate. So Congress writes a law, right? So this is a good segue into the Food Safety Modernization Act. They pass a law. So just like the Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, from all the things from the Poison Squad and Upton Sinclair when he wrote The Jungle and the people got upset, right? They passed a law and they created an agency and said, all right, you people need to follow this law and you need to create regulations on how you are going to enforce this law, right? The law is not regulation.
Yes. The law is not regulation. Yeah, I agree with you. Actually, Brian, if you make I'm going to say a fair comparison, laws are kind of policies, and the regulations is kind of the procedures on how you are going to achieve that goal of the policy.
Right. So the law says, we'll just make one up, right? The law says people cannot eat food that is going to be adulterated. Okay, well, that's all it says. FDA or USDA or whoever takes that and says, okay, what does that mean? How do we enforce that? So when we're out at a production facility, what are the regulations we're going to follow? Now there's another level below that, guidance, right? FDA often puts out guidance as well.
Yes. And guidance are basically a kind of an interpretation. Is an interpretation of the regulation by the regulator, something like that.
Right. It's like we need some additional clarification. The regulation isn't
Yeah.
quite clear. Now, a lot of times, guidance becomes regulation over time. And sometimes when FDA is auditing and looking at your stuff in the plant, they treat guidance as regulation. So back to that food law piece of it, you need to understand all of this and what is truly things that can be written up for and what are things that are not. So one of the things with my clients, and I'm sure you see this too, is there's a very important guidance document out right now around FSMA Appendix 1, right? Where FDA has put some clarification around what they consider microchemical and physical threats that you should be looking at in your HACCP plan. It's not law, it's not regulation, it's guidance. But if you don't follow that guidance, FDA is going to have a lot of questions for you.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So look at this, Brian.
Yeah.
So we have the background now. You know now, well, we know that the law says that somehow we need to define is our product, and that's the specifications. Then we need to make sure that in order to achieve that, the goal is to work under sanitary conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And now the link between the law and the regulation is that in the regulation, and I'm going to use human food, in 21 CFR 117, which is a preventive control for human food, we have Subpart B. In Subpart B, we have everything that is required to maintain sanitary conditions, which is what the law requires.
Right.
And those sanitary conditions is called the current good manufacturing practice.
Right. And it used to be a separate section in the law because it predated Food Safety Modernization Act. But when they wrote that, they said, you know, we need to include this in that, right? So they rewrote the GMPs. It's been a long time since they've done anything with it, and put that inside of 117 with the different subparts, A through G, right?
Yes, yes. Actually, before 117, Brian, remember that we have 110.
110.
And if you look at 110 and 117 Subpart B, and you kind of try to match, those sections are exactly the same. Personal, and then plant grounds, and then sanitation controls in sanitary facilities and equipment, and so on. But they match exactly, except for 11795, which is the clarification from the FDA indicating that any company manufacturing food for human, and if for some reason food is going to end up being food for animals, that food needs to be treated exactly the same way or very close to, in order to prevent that food from being adulterated. Because, by the way, Brian, remember that the definition of food includes humans and animals. So whenever a product is adulterated for humans, it could be adulterated for us too.
Right. Yeah. So FSMA really put some new requirements in for the people doing animal food, right? It was essentially the way I look at it is animal food is almost human food now. Regulatory.
Almost. Yeah. Yeah, almost. I mean, they may have different specific requirements. So, for example, yes, I know that trying to identify a specific salmonella for humans and a specific salmonella for, I don't know, chickens is quite difficult. And there is one species that is, bad for both. But there is the Salmonella gallinarum, and that salmonella is going to affect chickens only, not humans. Now, can you actually detect that at the facility? No, you just need to maintain sanitary conditions to prevent any presence of any type of salmonella.
Right, absolutely. So what's interesting here too, right? So we're right now we're specifically talking about, what the regulatory and the law side of things, but then you also have third-party audits. And just a quick segue for people who are putting questions and things in the comments, please put all your questions in here as we're going along. We'll save some time here at the end, and we'll swing back and we'll address everybody's comments and questions. So keep them coming. We love that. We love that interaction. So now there's the third-party side of thing, right? So there's the regulations under the law, but then there's also standards under GFSI and SQF and all the other standards, right? which very, very closely parallels what FDA is saying.
Yes, I agree with you. Very closely, but not exactly.
Not exactly. So one of
Not
the things,
exactly.
example, under the new SQF version 9, right, is they see, and we see this in recalls time and time again, lots and lots of recalls for mislabeling and allergen cross-contamination and these type of things. So they've really beefed that up. So FDA, right, when they change the regulations, it happens very, very rarely, and there's a long process they have to go through to do that. So they really don't like to do that. The third-party standards have much more flexibility, right? So they can change stuff quickly.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know what, Brian? I was quite curious about this topic. And yesterday, what I did is I collected all the since 2015, I have the Excel spreadsheet that you can download from the FDA website with the outcome of the inspections. And they say, well, you know, we and I'm reading that right now on my screen. On 2015, the frequency that FDA investigators, inspectors raised nonconformity for not having an effective, it's called exactly, the short description is lack of effective pest exclusion. Okay. And that was in 2015. They were citing 110.35. Okay. Which is exactly the section of the GNPs related to pest. Well, 320 inspections end up having that exact same violation of the regulation.
Interesting.
And that's 2015. But again, generally, let me show you something. In 2015, what I did in order to have this summary for this session today is I grabbed the first 15 most, you know, violations most identified in those inspection reports, the first 15. Okay. So in 2015, in those first 15, we have 58% of those were related to GNs. In 2016, 76% of those 15 first frequencies for elections, 76% were related with the GNPs. In 2017, 93% were related with the GNPs. In 2018, 71, and in 2019, 63%. So it is evident, Brian, that the real problem is that people is not following the GMPs exactly as written in the regulation. They have no clue what is there.
Right. No, and they need to understand that. And that's a good point. Because when FDA comes in, and we talked about this previously, is FDA has two levels of investigation and inspection when they come into your facility. The kind of the base level is what they call a GMP audit, right? So they're going to come in. Yeah. FDA is always going to look at your GMPs when they come into your plant. They may take a glance at your food safety plan if they're not concerned, but they're always going to look at GMPs. So you need to be ready for them on that.
Yeah. So look at this. So after grabbing that, what I did is I created some kind of summaries to give our audience in this today in this session. So the first 15 most frequent observations account for between 24 and 34% of all the observations in a year. The first 15, it's almost between a quarter and a third of all the observations. Okay. And now look at this between 2015 and 2019. And within, of course, those first 15 most frequent observations, between 58 and 93% were related to violations to the GMPs. Oof. So that should be a very clear message, Brian, that we should go back to our food safety systems and then grab the requirements and see how effective is or are our programs to control those conditions.
Right. Well, and if you're an FDA investigator in a plant, Jose, and you see these basic failures of people not washing their hands and areas of the plant that aren't being cleaned properly, all these things, right? What's going to go through your mind is if they can't do the basics and control their prerequisites and preventive controls, how effective is their food safety plan?
There you go. There you go. Because now they are working under insanitary conditions if they are not in compliance with the GMPs. And that will automatically trigger that, well, you know what? Your product is adulterated because you cannot work under insanitary conditions.
Right. And then you're going to get a 483 or worse, a warning letter.
Yep. So you know what I did, Brian, after going through that assessment is I said, well, let me grab something that will somehow match with the requirements in the GMPs. And I just choose as a general, approach, observations related with Pearl, which is now in 17.10. Observations related with the plant construct design, which are related with 117.20. Observations related with the cleanliness of the facility. Observation related with pest control, and observation related with the. And look at this. I'm going first to the totals. The reason number one why the FDA has been raising observations between 2015 and 2019 is pest control.
Yeah.
With 2,378 different inspections raising violations of pest control. The second category was cleanliness. The facility was not enough, and that was 2003 inspections. Then we have plant construction and design. The facility was not designed or constructed in a way that is going to prevent adulteration of the products. And that was 1,459. And then we have personal people with 641. And at the end, we have the equipment, 556. So when I was looking at those results, Brian said, well, I have been auditing for 9-10 years, third party, SQF, BRC, and other second party audits, but I've been in a lot. And I said, well, you know what? During my audits, I was not able to see that much of pest infestation in food facilities. So yes, I was looking at facilities that were certified, but there are many, many other facilities that are not certified, and maybe those are the ones that are triggering those observations.
Well, I mean, part of it too, right, is they know you're coming, right? In most cases. Let's get the plant pretty for Jose. He's coming to do the audit. So
and
there's
the FDA shows up without announcement.
Right. FDA just shows up and there they are. And they see you how you really are, right? And this is why. Yep. So this is something I post on LinkedIn and things like this quite a bit. But FDA, every other week or so will post their warning letters and 483s and put out notifications on that. And when you read through those, and I definitely recommend you do that, is they're generally broken into two areas.
I do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it will be, okay, here's the violations relative to your food safety plan, your preventive controls, all of the actions associated with that. And then there's always a section on what we're talking about today, which is the GMPs, right? And there is 2 California companies that were recently cited. And there was a company out in California, a food company, and oh my goodness, this letter goes on for pages of what these guys did wrong. The GMPs. So to your point, right? They didn't hold under conditions that are necessary to minimize potential for contamination, right? And FDA references what that was. And then FDA saw liquid dripping in different places and all these type of things, right? And just think, if you're this company, and I'm going to spare them the embarrassment on this of naming them, but it's public, right? That's out there, and your embarrassment is for everyone to see, and it's good, right? FDA is calling them out and saying, shame on you, right? You should not be failing in this basic of a way, because if you do this, you're going to make people sick or worse.
Yep, exactly right.
Mhm.
So what I did also, Brian, in order to kind of work through these, like we do as consultants, I said, well, let me try to. I'm going to grab pest, which was the number one, and I'm going to try to perform a root cause analysis using the Ishikawa. And I
Mhm.
said, okay, so we have a problem with, and I'm going to cite exactly as is written here. Hold on. It's a lack of effective pest exclusion. Okay. And watch out because, I mean, for me, when I see the word exclusion, that means that the tolerance is zero.
Right.
Okay, so be careful. This is our principle number 3. This is the guidance. 0 or less is acceptable. Less means not present. And
Mhm.
whenever you have presence of pest, whatever it is, you're not in compliance because the requirement is exclusion, which means 0. Okay, so
Yeah.
I said, well, let me analyze which one is the potential cost of lacking of effective pest exclusion from the people, from the personal. So
Right.
maybe people was not effectively trained. Maybe they don't have refresher trainings with the right frequency because that's how they get knowledge on how to do whatever it is for personal.
Right.
Can you think about any other reason why people may have a potential impact on pest exclusion, Brian?
I mean, themselves, right? I mean, what are they bringing into the facility?
Oh, yes, very good point. So if you
Yeah.
have a third party, so what about the training of these guys? Okay, so that's from the people. Now,
Yeah.
from the ingredients, are we performing inspections of the packs and the boxes and the product are coming in? What about if there is infestation in the facility and we're receiving that product? If we don't perform an inspection, we're bringing in into the facility,
Right.
and that could be another reason.
Exactly. Well, and two, I mean, plants are always turning over personnel, right? You're always hiring new people. They're coming in, and if you're not catching them up front and giving them the training on why this is also important, you've lost a huge opportunity.
We, you know what, Brian? Maybe we should have a training session one day and start having a conversation about the effectiveness of the training program. But
Mhm.
well, that's for another time.
Another
So the
topic. Eh?
next section, another topic for another. So from plant and environment, I'm going to say, do we have the right setup of pest control devices? Are we checking that the doors are closed and sealed? It's part of our program. If we have windows are closed and we need to keep them open for whatever reason, those are screened on the outside. And
Yeah.
that's basically reasons why we may have pest inclusion when we're using the Ishikawa or the fishbone.
Right.
From measurement, if we're using any kind of a chemical, are we using the right dose of that chemical? Are we using the right equipment? Is the equipment calibrated to measure the right concentration of that chemical when we're
Mhm.
making the mixture?
Right. Well,
For the equipment is, I mean, are we using the right equipment? I don't know if you have any other idea besides
I mean,
those.
here's the way I always looked at it: is your pest control program is only as good as two things. What we're talking about right now, right, which is your internal management of that program, and your actual pest control operator. It's only if you've got a good superstar pest control operator, you're going to have a good program because they're going to go above and beyond and look and dig and
Yes.
find and report things. If you don't have a good pest control person who's coming into your plant and doing these things, you're never going to have a good program.
Yeah. Yeah. Actually, you know what? I'm going to skip keeping through. I'm just missing one. But you know what? I believe that at this time is very important.
Yeah.
In setting up systems, we need to understand the requirements, and then we write our policies and our procedures and work instructions, and that's what we're going to use in for training people, and then they are supposed to be executing that. Now,
Right.
when we hire Ryan, a pest control contractor, and these guys are the ones responsible for the control, for the monitoring of the control, that doesn't mean that they are responsible for the verification. it is our responsibility to make sure the program is effective. The way that you're setting up that is effective is a responsibility of the company, and that you are verifying that the program is being performed exactly as written.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So the responsibility is 100% the pest control company.
Right. It's on your desk. Absolutely. So, right, we're covering a ton of ground here. And so part of what I think would be good to kind of circle this up, Jose, and kind of bookend this for our audience here is what we're doing is we're giving you a lot of tools that you can use internally, because you have to sell this, right? You have to talk with your boss and the VP of operations and all these other people and show them why, as quality people and food safety professionals, we need the resources to maintain these programs, right? We have to have training systems. We have to have a clean plant. We have to have good pest control programs in place, all these things, because FDA is looking at these very closely. And if you don't have that foundation in place, you're not going to do well during the audit. You have to constantly update this. And the data and the information that we're talking about here today is one, it's like an arrow in your quiver that you can use to help show the rest of the company why this is so important.
Yeah, actually, just because of your your opinion about these, Brian, right now, I will say that this is also, again, and this is something we discussed last week, but again, this is also part of the food safety culture. Senior management needs to understand all of these requirements and the effectiveness of those programs in order to make sure that the facility remains in full compliance. The FDA makes strictly the owner is strictly responsible for everything. Any 483 or in any warning letter, the name that is there is the most senior person at the facility.
Right. Here's a little tip on that side of what I used to do in my plants. So I would make sure in my plants, I would teach my quality managers that everybody is responsible for this. The supervisors, the managers, everybody in the plant. If I am the supervisor of production and I have a team of people, he is responsible for maintaining the GMPs and the other activities within his area, not me. He is. Yes. So what I would do when I would tour a plant, if I saw GMPs being violated, so let's say somebody didn't have their hairnet on quite right or something, something not really serious, I would go over to the supervisor. I wouldn't go and talk with that person and correct it. I would go and talk with the supervisor and say, so you're responsible for this area? Yes, yep, this is my area. And your people follow GMPs, right? Oh, absolutely, we follow GMPs. Well, can you please explain to me why that person doesn't know how to wear their hairnet right? And their eyes get big and they're embarrassed, right? And they go and they fix that immediately. What happens then is after I leave, that's the important part, right? So now the supervisor talks with that employee and says, that was the VP of QA. And he just made me look really bad. I'm watching you. You need to follow GMPs, right? So now I've recruited that supervisor to maintaining them GMPs, and it's not my strict, it's just not my role. And you need to, and this is your point on food safety culture, Jose, because it's super important, right? That's how you begin building this, right? It's not just us, it's everyone in the facility.
What you just mentioned is called empowerment in the food safety culture. It's exactly right.
Absolutely. So at the end of this, so I think this is a good point to start digging into some questions here, Jose, and answer people's questions. So please put your questions in the chat. Also, if you throw your email in here, so Jose has been talking about a whole lot of data, right? This has all been downloaded. Jose and I have downloaded this data from FDA and put it in an Excel file. If you want a copy of that, we want to help. So we will give that to you free. So just drop your email in there and we'll get back to you and we'll send that to you. So let's look at some questions here and go back through the stream, seeing some friendly names and people we know. Melody, so amazing to see you here. Thank you. Tunisia, wow, somebody in Tunisia, love it. That's great because their food safety programs, if they're bringing food into the US, foreign supplier, right, they need to comply. Let's see, so LinkedIn user here. So we were talking earlier about law and policy and things like that. So comment here, law is not policy. Policy is the interpretation of the law applicability, right? Yeah, I mean, we're kind of speaking anecdotally here, right? We're not strictly speaking legal terms. So that's a valid point. Guidance cannot be written on 483s. True, but guidance will
100%.
lead the investigator to find things that they can write up under the regulation. So if under Appendix 1, you are not, let's say, for example, under Appendix 1, you're producing a product and FDA is recommending under the hazard analysis for micro that you should be looking at salmonella, and you didn't look at salmonella, FDA is going to have a lot of questions for you. Why did you look at that for your product?
And you know what, Brian? FDA is going to raise a nonconformity against 117.130. No, 130 is the hazard analysis.
Hmm?
Yes.
I think so, yeah.
And they are going to be raising a nonconformity against your hazard analysis because that you that guidance. Now, yes, that is who? Luis. So yes, the guidance is not going to be cited in a 483, but you're going to find a match in relation that is applicable to that failure that they saw.
Yep, absolutely. So let's see. So Andrew here is saying, seems like third parties might have made themselves compliant with FDA and USDA and then added some. Maybe if you are third party compliant, you are probably FDA and USDA compliant. You need to look at both. Don't take the risk, right? There's gaps. You need to be.
There are gaps. They are not exactly the same. And you guys need to read the key here. And this is something that I'm always using in my classes, Brian. You need to have a copy of the regulation and you need to have a copy of whatever is the standard, the scheme that you're following. BRC, SQF, FSSC, whatever it is. Read it and look for the intention in each and every single statement.
Right. Well, this gets back, and this is a nice full circle to our conversation, right? When you work in quality and food safety, a lot of times you wear a legal hat. You need to understand, and what I refer to it as, you need to know the rules of the game you're playing to. If you don't know the rules of the game, you're wandering around blindly.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent conversation. So, any other closing thoughts, Jose, on this Friday the 13th?
Spooky facts.
At least there's no full moon or anything like that, so that's good. So again, right, so Jose and I do this every Friday at 8 a.m. Mountain Time, 10 a.m. Eastern. And if you have suggestions on topics or things you would like to talk about, we would love to see your suggestions. So there's a couple emails, and let me throw these up here. So my email, barmantrout@foodsafetyfoundation.com. And so these videos are available afterwards, so you can write these down as well. And Jose's email is jose.sabal, S-A-B-A-L, sorry, at Sabal, FSC, I can't talk this morning, FSC.com. Gee, mini Christmas, that was difficult. And
okay, Brian, one thing that you and me have a conversation about this, and I'm not sure if we can go around it. We will figure that out. But it is possible that some Fridays we may not be doing this because Brian is going to be busy doing some work with a client, or I will be doing exactly the same. But you know what? I'm going to let you know, guys, whenever we are, have that situation and we need to postpone or advance or whatever, we need to move the date, we'll
figure it out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So with that, we'll close out. And so, Jose, thanks again. Fantastic discussion. So GMPs, super important. You need to install the basics and always focus on those if anything else in your plans are going to work. So remember those GMPs, learn the law, and if you have any questions, we're here to help. So thanks again, Jose, and have a great weekend.
You, Brian. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.